You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 8.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook of your choice and a 30-day free trial by visiting borntokickarse.com/audible. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. To download your free audiobook today, go to borntokickarse.com/audible. Again, that's borntokickarse.com/audible for your free audiobook. Do you know someone or know of someone who walks the walk and would like to hear them on the Born to Kick Arse podcast? They can be from any field, but they need to have an inspiring story that will help to motivate others to achieve their own goals. If you do, please head over to borntokickarse.com/suggest a guest and fill out the form. We'd love to hear from you. For many triathletes, completing an Ironman is the ultimate test of endurance. Swimming 3.8 kilometres, riding 180 kilometres, and then running a full marathon of 42 kilometres. Some athletes are talented enough to then qualify for the Ironman World Championships in Hawaii, the mecca of triathlons. Fewer still dare to attempt the Ultraman, a double Ironman over 3 days. Only a handful of humans have attempted the Epic 5 Challenge, which is 5 iron distance triathlons over 5 days on 5 Hawaiian islands. Then there is Craig Percival, who in March 2016 completed the 8 in 8 in 8, which is 8 full iron distance triathlons in 8 of Australia's states and territories in 8 consecutive days. In this interview, Craig talks about what he went through and what kept him going. Enjoy the interview. Craig Percival, thanks for your time today and welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
Matthew, thanks for having me, mate.
So how's the toenails? We'll start off with that. A couple of weeks ago, I believe you, was it 2 weeks ago or 2.5 weeks ago that you finished your epic adventure that we'll get into?
Yeah, so that's right. We are now at, I guess officially would be at about 17 to 18 days. We finished early on a Monday morning. So the toenails, there's definitely only one left.
Oh, okay.
It'll pretty much go, I imagine, in the next couple of days. So there was a bit of carnage in the, obviously during the event, and then my doctor took to them about 6 days afterwards. There was some knots. I don't want to get too graphic, but there was some not so healthy stuff happening underneath, I guess, the toenails, and he needed to remove those. So all good. They weren't. The truth is, they weren't that painful compared to everything else that had happened during the event. It was actually pretty minor, and even during the event, they weren't that sore. They looked pretty bad, but
yeah, I actually saw a clip of you. I think it was like Channel 9 or Channel 7. They did a bit of a story on you after you'd finished. And the camera panned down to your toenails, and I could empathise. And yeah, it was interesting. You actually got a doctor to remove them afterwards, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, so look, they only really hurt. So during the event, obviously we'll get into that, which I'm really looking forward to. When they were wrapped up in the bike shoes and wrapped up in the running shoes, they were okay. When I took the running shoes off, that was, I guess, a moment where obviously they expand and blood perhaps starts flowing to them a little differently, or the whole realization that, oh yeah, okay, there they are. And then certainly on the flights, they were, with that little bit of extra pressure you just feel them a little bit more. But I don't know. I didn't. My toes were never ever going to stop me getting through. You know, if I needed to have my toenails taken off mid-event, so be it. All it does is it just exposes nerves on the, that live underneath those toenails, and they definitely can be quite tender when they're taken off initially. But all you do, mate, is you just cut the tops of your shoe. Take that toe piece out, and I've never had to do that, but I've seen other ultra runners do that. So, that was the plan, but we never got to that point. So all good.
So before we actually do it, like a deep dive into the 8 Ironman in 8 days in 8 states, can we maybe rewind and maybe just tell us a bit about yourself, what your interests were growing up, sports-wise, and what sort of led you into endurance sports and in particular triathlons?
Oh, great question, mate. So look, I've certainly, to me, I grew up in Hobart, Tasmania. To me, it was pretty average, average in a really great way. A normal school kid, teenager, whatever, was very active through high school with sport, played all the usual stuff, cricket, soccer, got involved in water polo in high school, was never, made a state team as a goalie for water polo, was never an amazing swimmer, didn't even really do swimming until actually, basically after water polo, because I was a goalie, so we never used to swim much, and did well as a water polo goalie, made an Australian junior team, and then ended up playing National League. They used to fly me, and I used to play for the Canberra Dolphins, which was way back in like 1990, and ended up doing okay with that. Got pretty disillusioned with the travel and the loneliness, which is kind of odd given how I went to triathlon, which is also pretty lonely, but shifted from water polo, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I wouldn't change anything, but the guy that ended up replacing me in the Australian University's team ended up going on to the Sydney Olympics, and I remember, at that time that happened, and I saw that he made it. It was like, I want, what if? But I didn't dwell on that too long. I wasn't in a great spot when I left water polo, and went and played with my mates and learned how to play Aussie rules, and had 3 or 4 years of, I guess, just being one of the boys, being in a different type of team sport than water polo was, I guess, and that was great. Played in a premiership. Got a best and fairest, and just had a couple of years of just good hard country footy. But then just, in 1995, and to me it's a great synergy about what's happened, I guess, with what I've just done with 1880 in 95. My guess is I was probably hungover on the lying on the couch, and I watched John McLean become the first wheelchair athlete to finish the Hawaii Ironman. So that was 1995, and he has a really famous, I guess, line, and that is, kind of, I've forgotten it. Not what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but God, jeez, man, now I've bloody forgotten it. That's just going to wreck the story, but I'll remember it later. And I just remember watching and going, you know what? If he can do it, I can do it. And I'd done a couple of like baby triathlons up to that point, 200-meter swims and 10K rides and 2K runs and stuff like that. But I wasn't really an endurance athlete at that point. And I just remember watching John do that, and that just sparked something. And that was 95. And then I gave footy away pretty much. I don't think I even went back to footy that year or the next year. And I just started training for triathlon. And
so was this sort of like when you were in your early 20s or late teens, sort of around there? Or?
Yeah, 95, I would have been 24 years old, and was just drawn to Ironman. Did my first Ironman in 1997. My wife and I had a little midlife crisis at 26 years of age and decided to travel around the world. So we spent 18 months living overseas, and I went and did, Ironman Florida back in 1997, and was just hooked, and was just really focused on getting to Hawaii. And I did 3 on my third Ironman. I qualified at Ironman New Zealand and went to Hawaii and raced it then 4 years in a row between 99 and 2002.
Where was this, in Hawaii?
Yeah, so went to Hawaii Ironman 4 years in a row, and that was great. Got within a couple of minutes of making the podium in Hawaii, and I don't know, felt look, everything was going great. Then I took quite a break after that, probably between 2003 and, sorry, I won't bore the listeners with too much detail, but took probably 5 years away from Ironman. Just, I don't know, needed to focus on the business and a few other things in life, and then kind of, got back into it 08, 09, somewhere there. And, I don't know, up until a couple of weeks ago, I'd done 20 Ironmans and PB of 902. So, I was always up there with my age group, and, it took a long time, Matthew. I was very lucky to have a very good coach who, in his early days, later on, he ended up being, as Triathlon Australia, high performance coach, Bill Gavran. So, look, I was lucky to have a very good coach and developed a really, really sound aerobic base. And that is what has allowed me to do, what I've done recently. And, and I think it's important to me. It's important for listeners to understand, I've been doing this for 30 years. And so even though I took a 5-year break in the 2000, whatever, I was still training. Do massive, but I pretty much would always do something every day or something every second day. So, I always said that I have a lot of cash in my bank, and, the other week with 8 in 8, I cashed a fair chunk of that in, and it wasn't a project that was, 6 months training for or anything like that. It was a culmination of a lot of years of work. So
it would have been pretty much the culmination of your entire life, your entire sporting life, I guess.
Yeah, you could look at it like that. So, you go all the way back to water polo, or even as, they talk about, young kids, start developing that aerobic edge, before they're 10 type thing. Well, back then, to me, we used to just spend hours riding our bikes around the neighbourhood and all that sort of stuff. So, I certainly believe, and that's how I viewed it during the event was, I've got a lot of years in the bank, and I just, didn't think about it every minute, but I knew it was there, and, to me, it definitely paid off. Yeah.
So just to clarify for listeners, what are the distances for an Ironman?
An Ironman is a 3.8 kilometre swim. It's a 180 kilometre ride, and that's a 42 kilometre run. So,
you have dessert with a marathon.
Yeah, that's it. So, up until a couple of weeks ago, no one had ever done, 8 Ironmans in 8 days in the 8 states and territories of Australia. So it was something that I came up with. I raced Ultraman back in 2014, which Ultraman World Championships was a 3-day triathlon over in Hawaii, and got second there by 5 minutes, just missed the win there. So, had a really good race, but was just looking for just something different. I'm not old, I'm not young, but at that point, I guess I was about 43 or something, and knew that I'd had a good race, but I really just felt like there was still something missing. If I was going to hang up my triathlon boots as such, which I haven't, and no plans to, but it was just kind of, I just feel like I need to do something else that's not a race. So, on the plane home from that World Championships, came up with the idea with 7 in 7, and then kind of realised that I'd left someone out there, and just the 7 in 7 came about because 7 days in a week. So we added in whichever one it was, Northern Territory or ACT, and 8 in 8 was hatched some 16 months prior to the event, and then around it rolled. Yeah.
So just before we move into the 8 in 8, and just for clarity, the Ultraman distance, what distance is that?
Yeah, so Ultraman's a 3-day race. So day one is a 10 kilometre swim, 145 kilometre ride. So that's day one. I think my day ones, I've done 2 Ultramans. I'm not great with numbers. It doesn't. So I think day one was like 6.5 to 7 hours for me. You get a 12-hour cutoff for everyone. Day 2 is a 275-kilometre ride, so that's a pretty long day in the saddle. That for me was same thing, 7.5 to 8 hours. And then day 3, you finish with a double marathon. So the way they came up with that was kind of similar to Hawaii, the regular Hawaii Ironman, is that it was born on the big island of Hawaii. So you started in Kona and they had a 10-kilometre swim down the coast and basically a ride around the island that finished at Harvey, and then you ran from Harvey back to town. So yeah, that's where those distances were born from. So,
and I believe as well, there's another, triathlon event that's even above the Ultraman. I think it's the Epic 5. Was that it?
Yes, yeah. 5's been around for not too long. A guy named Jason Lester, he got that off the ground. He's a disabled athlete or a physically challenged athlete. I think he's missing an arm or something like that. Yeah, so he started that a few years ago, and that's right. That's 5 Ironman triathlons in 5 days on 5 Hawaiian islands.
So did that tempt you at all, or did you sort of have an inkling that that wasn't hard enough?
Believe me, 5 would be plenty hard enough. You know, it's funny. I only heard about that event a couple of years ago. But what happened at Ultraman, when I did Ultraman Canada, I met a guy named Tony Horton, who was an Aussie living abroad, and we had both, really fallen in love with Ultraman. Like the first year I did it, I really was like, this has got to come to Australia. So we hatched a plan to bring it to Australia, which we successfully did last year. And unfortunately, the timing with Epic 5 is it's actually pretty much the same time as Ultraman Australia. So next year, or even this year, I think it's on the week before. So for me, it was never really on the cards because I wanted to help bring Ultraman Australia, to Australia somewhere, and that's in Noosa now. And I'm wrapped we have, because for me, I hadn't grown style of Ironman at all. I love Ironman, and obviously I've just done 8 of them. So, but I just felt I'd had such a great time at Ultraman Canada and another great time at Ultraman Hawaii. I wanted other Ironman athletes or other endurance athletes to experience what I'd done. And, the different part about Ultraman is there's a very real team element to your success at Ultraman, because you have to have you're kind of self-supported by 2 crew, right? So you have to rely on 2, 3, 4 of your best mates or your wife or your partner or whatever. And, it just made, it made my event really special. And I was lucky enough to get just 2 volunteers, right? And the 2 guys that I met in Canada that crewed for me were just bloody amazing. Like, they dead set buried themselves. And I actually, I went in pretty naive. I was like, what do we need a crew for? I could stop at the shop, or even though I was racing, I was like, well, I need a bit of water here and there, blah, blah. But, it was really hot in Canada, and, those guys just really ended up, working their bums off to keep me hydrated and fed, and, it ended up being a real race. And, so I wanted to be really involved in bringing that to Australia. So that's my long-winded answer to why I haven't done a big 5, but it does look like a fascinating event and a cool event. I mean, Hawaii, there's something very special about the Hawaiian Islands. They're, the 14 different temperate zones that there are on the big island of Hawaii, and, the winds, and it's obviously hot. But, the people are so relaxed. So, it's a very unique place, and I'm sure the other 4 islands are just as stunning as the big island of Hawaii.
So how do you actually get to participate in the Hawaiian Ironman? Do you need to qualify in other Ironman events, around the world?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's based on it's kind of a formula, if you like. There's, these days there's only, anywhere between 20 to 50 slots per race, per Ironman, and basically they divvy that number up between all the different age groups. So you kind of got to come first or second in your age group. So those 5-year gaps, 30 to 34, 35 to 39, etc. So, it's definitely, you've got to be at the pointy end of your age group to do well. Sometimes it rolls down, but, so that's how you get to Hawaii, yeah.
Moving forward to the 8 in 8, how, pretty much from the time you sort of formulated this idea or had, when this seed started to sprout, How long in terms of planning did it take to turn this dream into a reality?
Yeah, so it was 16 months from, 15 and a half from Ultraman when I first dreamt it through to, I guess, execution. Really, I guess the first probably 6 months, it was just, sketches on whiteboards and more dreaming about it. And then, I guess at some point, and I don't remember exactly when, but they cancelled Ironman Melbourne. So I'd kind of had it in my head that I wanted to finish with Ironman Melbourne. I just thought it would be an amazing way to do an official Ironman as the last one. Look, they ended up cancelling Ironman Melbourne. So at that point, we just decided, okay, well, I was lucky enough that, a very good friend of mine and an athlete that I coached, Kate Patterson, she came on board as a project manager and she helped and her and I just, I guess started in this process and she was amazing and there were lots of people that helped get this off the ground. We had a weekly, probably from 6 months out, no, not 6 months, 4 months out, we had a weekly project meeting. And at most of those, there would have been 4 or 5 people. So, I was very, very lucky that people just volunteered their time and brought different elements to the table that were that I definitely don't have strengths in. And I knew as obviously my training picked up and then just, I had to keep my normal life rolling. There were going to be things that, I would never get to or I didn't know how to do. So, Triathlon Victoria were part of that process. The CEO, he put a lot of time into it and got Triathlon Australia involved in the event and all the other state and associations as well. So lots of, ridiculous, the list is very long, Matthew, to thank everyone. And those people know who they are and certainly I'll touch base with them personally. But, so, that to answer your question, it was definitely a very real solid 6 months of planning and bringing it together. And, we ended up we had a contact in every city that was kind of the man on the ground, so to speak. And that person was responsible for, lane hire or helping, work out where the courses were going to be and, quite a few different logistical aspects, I guess.
So the 8 in 8 in 8, that kicked off in Darwin, did it, on the 6th of March?
Darwin, the 6th of March, yeah. So, look, my wife and I, I guess first and foremost, my wife is, it was my number one support crew and she was the only person that was there for all 8 of them. And, we lead a pretty busy life. She manages a store in South Melbourne here, the Aqua Shop, and, I have a full-time gig as the coach and, and we have 2 gorgeous kids that are incredibly active and keep us very busy. So with that active lifestyle, we didn't even fly into Darwin until the day before and, which was not the normal. I would would have definitely preferred to have been in 3 or 4 days before and just chilled out and relaxed. But, so that was, a little bit of a different element. And, I remember just getting to that point where I just had to get on the plane and from that point just being, okay, now it's time to get the head in the game. And that's how it worked. A great day, the day before in Darwin, we went and did a presentation. So my reason or my goal, for 8 in 8 was to raise $80,000 for the John McLean Foundation. So that ties back into, John had been the one that had inspired me to get off my bum back in 1995. And I remember the saying, his famous quote, which, NBC called, is the pain won't last, but the memories will. And, it's something that's always, I guess, just been there in the back of my mind. And John and I have been friends for a while. And anyway, so we went and did a presentation in Darwin to a young boy called Samuel. And, it was a kind of one of those moments where, I didn't know who we were doing the presentation to, Lyndall and I didn't know who we were doing the presentation to, and we rocked up and, there was a family there and like 8-year-old boy in a wheelchair and, got chatting to his parents and they said, yeah, look, his name's Samuel and he's 8 years old and, Lyndall and I have a son who's 8 years old. So we didn't know this, leading in. I was like, oh, that's a little bit, there's something in alignment there. And they said how he'd been born he was 23 weeks. Well, our son Sam had been born at 33. So, and, he's ended up, really healthy and amazing. So, it was just an amazing way to start the event. We presented them with a check that's really going to help that Samuel learn to communicate better. And that was, it was just a really amazing way to kick off that we completely didn't expect. I kind of just remember after the presentation, I got back in the car with Linda and I was like, there's something, I'm not religious at all, mate, but, I just believe there was just something in that. I was like, that's probably the perfect way to kick off the event. That, the stars aligning, or, the fact that you share the same name as our Sam, and it was perfect, mate. So, so we started in Darwin. We moved, originally we'd planned to start Darwin so I guess the whole format of the event was basically, wake up, go to the pool, and the parameters we'd been working with in planning were, okay, what's the earliest we can get a pool open, or what time does a pool open, and what's the latest time we can get out of a city to get to the next city. So in this case for Darwin, it was a 5:30 flight that went to Perth. So I knew at the absolute very latest, we kind of needed to be finished by 4:30 at the airport. That was not the goal to finish then. It was more, okay, well, let's work, another half hour. Let's finish at 4:00 at the airport, or 4:00 somewhere really close to the airport, so they've got time to have a shower. So, there's lots of detail that, did the airport have a Virgin lounge where I could go and have a shower, and things like that. I'm sure no one wanted to sit next to me after 11 hours of exercise and no shower. So, the guy who helped us organise, Darwin is Michael Turner, and he kind of runs the Army Barracks pool. So we planned to start at like 5 a.m. Well, I'd been watching the forecast closely, and I guess, not unfortunately, but the challenge for us was there was clearly quite a big high that had decided to come across Australia in the days leading in, and Darwin was still forecast for, I think it was 34, but, a real feel of 43, 44, and that's exactly what ended up happening. So we started at 2 a.m. in Darwin, jumped out of the pool and was on the bike at 3 a.m.
So just with the pool, how many laps is that, the 3.8 Ks?
Yeah, 3.8. So a normal 50-metre pool would be 76. So I don't know what that is, 152 laps, I guess, of a 25-metre pool. But, the other, not a challenge, mate, it was just the way it is. The pool in Darwin was 31 degrees. So it's just like swimming in a bath. So my goal, and, we kept within, definitely I wanted to do everything legally as if it was a normal Ironman. So we were going to use a wetsuit, because that's completely legal in every Ironman in Australia, and there was definitely going to be no drafting. So the thing for me was, the 1,440 kilometres of riding, I was going to be on the front of every group, or riding solo on my own. There was not going to be any drafting, and to fast forward to the end, that's what happened. There were days when I didn't use a wetsuit because the pool temp was too warm, and that's what happened in Darwin. It was just too hot. And, I would have cooked myself if I'd had a wetty on in 31 degrees. So, got through the ride, and, it was just hot, just really, really hot. We had a course planned in Darwin, and this happened in every state. We had courses planned, but in most states we changed them. We certainly shortened up the runs a lot. We'd planned like 5-kilometre loops to kind of keep it interesting and not too boring, but in Darwin, it just got so ridiculously hot, and there was no access to the back end of this 5K loop. So we shortened it up to 700 metres out and 700 metres back, and off I went. And,
With the heat, were you mindful of keeping your fluids up, bearing in mind you still had 7 more Ironman to go?
Yeah, definitely, mate. So the first one, it was a really good, ego check. I'd had a goal to finish all of them in. It wasn't a goal that I put out to anyone. It was more just to me. I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm pretty sure I can just bang out these numbers, and those numbers added up to 11 hours, and I thought that was quite realistic. And I've never been 8 hours. I'm not a world champion or anything. I've been 9 hours, quite a few times. So I thought, to me, it was like, okay, well, 11 hours is, I think, a realistic number. But certainly in Darwin, I got probably. What happened was when we went around out the back, I got a little bit cooked because we ran out of water, and it just got to a point where it's like, you know what, this is crazy for me to push this, because I knew we were going to be finished by 2 p.m. or, 1 p.m. or whatever. We had stacks of time. So there's just a moment there where, you know what, this is ridiculous for me to push this hard when I've still got 7 more days of it. So it was a really good moment. It was a very clear thought process. And I just decided, you know what, I don't care what happens or what people say on social media about what times I do. Because up until then, I wanted 3 things out of the event. Was one, raise $80,000. 2, achieve 8 and 3, I wanted it to be a really positive experience for everyone involved. And to me, part of that was to make sure there was no negativity, I guess, on social media, because I knew all the people around me were positive, who I surround myself with. So that wasn't a problem. But, I know the downside of social media, and I knew that this would, I'd put myself out there in terms of promoting the event, or I guess promoting myself in the lead up, which I didn't enjoy, and that's not me. But I knew ultimately for us to get to $80,000 that, we had to create some awareness this event was on. So, so kind of just, as I say, somewhere through that run, it's like, you know what, I'm just going to back this off a bit. I'm going to play it smart, and we cooled it down. I got my body temperature under control, and through a really sensible, I guess, rehydration or cooling strategy, my wife went off and paid an absolute fortune at a local 7-Eleven for God knows how much water. And she said, every 700 meters I was going through like 1.5 liters, and we had ice there and everything. So, but it was essential. It got the job done, and I still have no idea what time I ran that day, but I know the young Samuel that had come, that we'd done the presentation with before, he came out and rocked up at the 35K mark, and that was a real highlight to see him. Just had this massive smile on his face, and his parents were there, were cheering us on, and just a really good reality check. I wasn't whinging or moaning or anything, but it was, I saw him there, and it's just like, what, this, I made a choice to do this. I don't care what people are saying on social media, and I just tried to enjoy the last, whatever hour or whatever it was, of however hot it was. It doesn't matter. And it's just a good reality check to go, you know what, life's pretty good. And I'm very aware that, for Lyndall and I, we have an amazing life. And, so that was Darwin, mate. And then a couple of people that I didn't know prior, took us back to their house, and I had an ice bath, and, just did a little bit of recovery, sat down, actually had some rest, had a bite to eat, and then, went to the airport and jumped on the plane, and everything was great. The plane was on time, and we landed in Perth at 8 o'clock that night. So, it was a really great start to the event, yeah.
And then in Perth, I believe there was also another hot day?
Yeah, Perth was 35, and Perth's very different to Darwin. It's obviously a lot drier. So what happened in Perth? Yeah, it's funny. We were only in Perth for 29 hours, but it seems like in hindsight that we were there for ages. But got the big curveball in Perth was probably, got a message from my mate who had planned to be because I didn't know the bike course. We had a bike course designed, and I knew where it went. It runs down the side of the freeway, but it's a bike path that runs all the way down to Mandurah or somewhere, and it's like, okay, well, let's do that. Nice, easy out and back. And anyway, so he messaged me at midnight Perth time saying he had tonsillitis and he was out. So that was a little bit of a curveball. So I was lucky that a couple of people stepped up. So I had a really good swim. We started at 5 a.m. Perth was the tightest day. We had to get a 5 p.m. flight out. So it really meant that I needed a sub 11-hour day, which I was actually really looking forward to, pushing the pace a little bit. And that's exactly what happened. Swam at 55. Sorry if those are people that might be interested in numbers. Swam at 55, and then rode a sub 5:30 or something like that. But I was just lucky enough that 2 of the people that came on the ride, who were friends of an athlete, Claire, that I used to coach, and they said they were only going to come for 3 hours total, but they realised I actually wasn't too sure where I was going, so they came for the whole 5.5 hours, and that was very typical across the whole event, Matt, that, people just stepped up. They just stepped up, and they gave me a lot more, I guess, of their time and support than I certainly would have ever imagined. And, it's certainly now a very humbling experience knowing that, there's just a lot of good people out there, mate. It was really good.
So did, when other people joined you on either the run or the ride, did that help to chew the time up and maybe get your mind off what you're actually doing and help the time fly by?
100%. So, and I knew that going in was if there were people there, they were welcome to ride next to me, and tell me whatever. Unfortunately, we weren't able to promote the riding as much as what we wanted, just from a liability point of view. We'd received some legal advice that, someone comes out and there's a bike accident, because it wasn't a sanctioned event and because I wasn't coaching the session, there's just that little bit of doubt of, okay, well, what happens if there's an incident? So we promoted where I was swimming and we promoted where I was running, and that's how it worked. And people still came on the bike and it was perfect. We didn't have any incidents. It was great. So certainly, yes, I thoroughly enjoyed the fact that people came, and I was really trying to be active in talking to people, and Michelle Duffy, who's a pro that I did not even know, she came out in Perth and she ran with me. I think she ran with me for like the first, say 15K or something like that, and it was just great. She just chatted away, and I told her right at the start, look, I might not give her much, but most people I think they kind of understood, and that was quite early, and certainly towards the end, people really got it because I was a little bit out of it. But it was great. It was just a distraction, and then it was the same with, Shane, who's my best mate, who was in Perth. He was responsible for getting me, so we had to finish the run at Perth Airport, and that's exactly what happened. It was his job on the mountain bike to feed and drink me, and run to the shops and grab extra ice and do all of that. And he had a massive job on that second day because it was so hot. So he was flying. I'm sure he was probably pretty tired by the end of it, but we arrived at Perth Airport at 3:50, which was a 10-hour 50 Ironman, and then at 4 p.m. they presented me with, they presented the John McClane Foundation with $1,000 check. So, Perth was just another excellent day. Would we have preferred 30 degrees or 25? Absolutely. But you know what? You just, every day, man, it was like, you know what? It could be worse. Every day could always be worse. We had a really good day in Perth. It was a great day. And that was the first, that was a cool moment. We were in the Virgin, up in the Virgin Lounge, and I was in their shower, which, and I just remember peeling stuff off and shoes, and I was standing in the shower and I heard them, give the first boarding call for the flight to Adelaide. I was like, oh, okay, time to go. So, sure enough, got all our stuff together and of course made the flight. So, that was a memorable moment for Perth.
And Adelaide was after that, was it?
Yep, off to Adelaide. Adelaide was what we were hoping would be our first easy day, and the reason that was is we flew in on the Monday night. The event was on the Tuesday, but then because we couldn't get to Hobart on the Tuesday night, we decided to stay in Adelaide on the Tuesday night and fly out on the Wednesday morning. So to me, that was going to be an easy day. Unfortunately, when it's 35. Regardless of kind of how slow you go or whatever, it still, has an effect.
So this was also another hot day, was it? Mid-30s?
Yeah, another 34, 35, which, it makes, obviously you get it in Perth on one day and then you're going to get it in Adelaide the next, and that's kind of how it went. And Hobart wasn't as bad. It was only 29 or something. So, look, Adelaide was still great. Good swim. The aquatic centre put us up there, and, I met a guy called Scott Lampshire who ended up coming to Melbourne. So he was the first guy that did the whole event with me, which was great. He rallied a few of his mates, and I think at one point we had about 10 to 12 on the bike, which was, certainly the biggest I'd had at that point. And then the same, a lot of those guys ran, and I just remember one guy rocking up halfway through the run and he was just stoked. And he goes, Craig, I'm wrapped. My son's soccer's been cancelled because it's too hot. I've come down to run with you. It was, and then so I kind of, those little things that stick more in my head than others. There's certainly plenty of periods, and certainly the further the event went on, my memory's not too sharp, but, Adelaide was great, was hot, but, we were back in the hotel room by, 6 or 7 p.m. and, had a normal dinner, so to speak, on the couch, and, Yeah, actually, that was probably Adelaide was probably the last. No, there's no probably. Adelaide was the last night we actually got a decent night's sleep, because after that it was a little bit challenging with the timeline. So yeah, so then the next morning we flew to Hobart and got to the airport at 6 a.m. I think we landed in Hobart at like 10 a.m. We had to go via Melbourne, which was, there was a real high point there. Was we picked up my kids and we took them to Hobart to be with my sister. And so got to Hobart, and look, Hobart was a little bit delayed in getting started. There was a bit of media there, which was great. It was like really important to have the media on board, but there's also more than a few minutes in chatting to them or getting set for that or whatever it was. And I had a lot of support in Hobart, being an ex-Hobart boy. I had a lot of mates there and family there, and I know we were probably at least half an hour late in getting started, which, as we'll get into, it started to have a real effect on the amount of hours I got to sleep, and that ultimately was the biggest challenge, was the sleep deprivation. So it had been okay, up until Adelaide. So did Hobart, a good swim in Hobart, and good ride not a great ride in Hobart, because the course we picked was not a great design course, and that was fully my responsibility. I picked the course, being an ex-Hobart boy. I thought, right, we'll ride up this road, but we just kind of hit a headwind the whole way, and then the sea change come in, so we kind of got the headwind on the way back. And every day up until then, I'd ridden 6 hours or better and felt really comfortable on the bike, and the bike's one of my strong points. Well, that day in Hobart, then we just made a few errors, and that ride blew out to like nearly 7 hours. And so all of a sudden we were starting the run an hour and a half later than we planned. So, anyway, all good. Did the run, ran down through Sandy Bay and found a looped course down there, which once again we changed. So we changed the bike course in Hobart and we changed the run course in Hobart. We ended up with about I think it was about an 800 metre loop down around Sandy Bay, and didn't finish until, I don't know, midnight or something. So, I remember that being the first, and look, it was excellent. I had lots of friends there and lots of family. It was, I remember more of it because I've seen photos and I've chatted to a few people now, but I remember that being the first point I experienced, and I wasn't sure what it was at the time, but talking to my sports doc, I was in touch with Mitch during the event. He kind of told me what was going on, and I remember finishing the marathon and driving home with my sister, and I just couldn't focus on like street lights or traffic lights or anything. I just, they were all really blurry, and it was kind of like I'd had 1,000 beers. I actually felt, and I said to my sister, look, you better get ready to pull over. I'm not, I think I'm about to, let go with a little bit. And, anyway, so speaking with him the next day, he goes, yeah, look, Craig, okay, this is the very real effects of insomnia and sleep deprivation, and you're just being tired. So, yeah, that was I don't know, it was good to hear him say that. It was like, okay, well, this is what it is. No worries, that's one of the side effects. And that was the first real night, or first, I guess, day that my feet had really blown up. I know, I vaguely remember Lyndall peeling off my shoes, and I know the expression on her face when she saw my toes. So at that point, we'd had 4 really hot days with lots of water involved, which means your shoes and socks and toes are constantly wet, and obviously your feet swell because of that heat. And look, my feet had blown up and there were blisters everywhere and all sorts of things going on. So, I know we had to do a little bit of work on my toes somewhere between Hobart and Canberra. I don't remember where, just to relieve a little bit of the pressure. And that to me was not what we were expecting. I really remember thinking, once I get through the second one, Adelaide will be cruisy, and I felt really confident that once we got through the first 2, not that we'd be home, but it wouldn't be that hard. Which I'm not an arrogant person, or I just thought, you know what, Hobart will be great because I've been in front of my family and friends and this and that. But the truth is, it was a lot harder. So
with Hobart, that would have been the fourth one. Was it in the back of your mind that you were halfway? Like when you finished Hobart, that, you'd sort of reached halfway, and I guess it was, in terms of numbers, you've completed half and you've got half to go. Was that sort of like a milestone that was in the back of your mind at all?
Definitely, mate. 100%. The truth was, I'd always told myself we were doing 7, and the reason I viewed it as 7, and it was just me, I never said that to anyone else, but I knew once we got, with Melbourne being number 8 and the support, I was going to get in Melbourne. I've lived in Melbourne now for 5 years. I've got a great bunch of athletes here and lots of friends here. I knew that Melbourne would be just a really emotional day, and I'd get swept along on the emotion of that final day. So, I constantly just talk, it's just 7. I've just got to get through 7. So I certainly knew once we finished Hobart, well, in my head, we were more than halfway. So, yeah, definitely that was a real positive to feel that we were halfway.
And then in Canberra after Hobart, how was that? I remember, I think I saw an article or read somewhere that I think, was it in Canberra that you started to really feel the pinch?
Yeah, so it's funny how things line up. I'd had a really, I guess, interesting chat with a radio station. Just a couple of guys had asked me some really good, to-the-point questions that kind of forced me to think about where we're at in Hobart, and it made me realise, holy shit, I'm actually not in that good a spot. But then I talked with them a little bit further, and I could feel myself coming out of, I guess, what was a potentially a negative thinking spot. And they asked me whatever other questions. I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm going to get through it. Whatever it was, I don't remember the questions. And I just remember leaving Hobart just on a little, and I had a mate who'd flown down. He's actually a sponsor of mine, Daryl from Shots, shameless plug, but he'd come down to Hobart just to lend support. And look, I know we stared at it, we looked each other in the eye at Hobart Airport, flying out of Hobart Airport, and I knew, I looked at him, and I know he knew I was in a really bad spot, but he just, I don't respond to sympathy. I love people's support, but at that point I didn't need sympathy or she'll be right, mate, or whatever. It was like he just said to me, Craig, it's just 4 more days of your life. And you know what? That was kind of what I needed to hear. It was like, look, it's just 4. You've done 4. It's only 4 more days. And so I jumped on the plane, and we chatted a little bit about nutrition. He'd been excellent with his nutritional advice to me, and we kind of changed tact, we just talked about having really healthy foods like fresh fruit, trying to have some fresh fruit, because I hadn't really had a lot of that. Obviously in the first couple of days it had been strongly gels and proper sports, I guess, nutrition, if you like, with the intensity of days 1 and 2. And then day 3 and 4 had been able to eat some solids during, but the heat had really rocked me. So he said, look, let's just try and get some watermelon or some fruits in, which wouldn't be a normal thing for me, because I certainly tell my athletes, look, stay away from that, too much fruits, like high in fiber, and, give it the runs and all of that sort of stuff. But, that advice worked, and certainly on the plane, I think we took some fruit on the plane or whatever it was. And even in Melbourne Airport, I went and got a fruit smoothie and just managed to get some calories in going into Canberra. And Canberra, look, the record keeps repeating itself, but it was another 34-degree day or something or other, and it was a late start. The flight had been delayed half an hour. And then look, this, once again, I don't want to sound like I'm whinging, but they were just all realities of what ended up happening. But without a doubt, the best point in Canberra was when I walked into the pool, and I knew we were late and all of that. There was a young kid there, 20-year-old. His name was Robbie Johnson, and once again, I didn't know he was there, and it was just another one of those moments in time that I'll certainly never forget. Robbie was hit I think he was 18 at the time. He was studying medical science at Canberra University, and he was hit by a car on a pedestrian crossing. And his mum and dad have a big job ahead of them, and Robbie's definitely improving, which was really, really encouraging. And Robbie was able to say my name, and so I was lucky enough to meet him, and he sat on the side of the pool. So I jumped in and started swimming, which was not easy to do, seeing Robbie there, but he'd certainly inspired me and pulled me out of my little, feeling sorry for myself, or are we going to get through, whatever, and swam for maybe 1 or 2K, and he just sat there in the chair, and even when I'd turn and breathe, I could see him yelling, I could hear him yelling, and it was just amazing. So anyway, then the best part about all of that was he kind of disappeared, and I just remember swimming and going, okay, fair enough, he's gone, I understand, and I just kept doing my own thing, and then sure enough, he actually jumped in the lane beside me, and he had a little floaty that he puts across his chest, and then he just kicked lying on his back, and he kicked a length of the pool, and he ended up doing about 8 laps of that, and I just stopped and I just kicked with him for a couple of laps, and it was just no doubt one of the best moments of my life. And all he kept saying was "Go, Craig, go, Craig," and I just even now it just makes me realise how lucky I am, and just what an amazing thing he did for me. I didn't think for him. What he did for me was he helped me get through Canberra, and he came out with his parents that night and sat in his chair while I ran up and down Lake Burley Griff, and his dad ran 15 kilometres with me, which was great. And we talked about Robbie and where they're at, and their lives have been just turned completely upside down, and they've got a long road ahead of them, and he was good enough to share a lot of private insights into their life, and I'll forever be grateful for that. So it's very hard to feel sorry for yourself when I guess you're presented with that.
Yeah. So did you, when you're, going through those real tough times, drawing your inspiration, do you try and draw upon, all those people that visited you, as well as like your kids and your wife? Did you try and draw inspiration from those people?
Yeah. So it's a great question, mate, because leading into it, I'd always spoken about drawing inspiration from my kids, and it's kind of I know for Ultraman, and even leading into 18-8, I guess I expected when it got really hard, I quite openly say I will run, and I really do mean it. I will run through a brick wall for my kids. There is nothing that will stop me, and they are certainly what drove me to almost win a world championship, and I really do. I race for them to make them proud, and Sam gets it, and sorry if I could just share a little story at Ultraman Hawaii. I came out of the water first, and then I won the bike, and I won the bike on day 2, but then on the run, unfortunately, I got run down, and we lost by 5 minutes over 24 hours and all of that. But the best part about all of that is Sam says to me, he goes, "Right, Dad, so." And he gave me the most beautiful hug at the end of every day, and he was just so proud, and because he actually got to see the race, because Linda would drive around in support. He goes, so there was the night of, or whatever it was. So, Dad, you're the best swimmer and you're the best biker, but you're just the second best runner, right? And it's just I don't know, it's just grounding, right? It's like what he I don't know whether he cares or not that I won, and of course I would have loved to have won. But I know I guess the seeds, or what Sam and Sienna see is I really hope that one day they'll be proud, and I hope I'm just in setting a good example or something. I don't know. I don't like to go there too often, and sorry, I don't know. I got onto that Ultraman story, but so in terms of inspiration, so during the event, I actually didn't think of my kids that much. I actually found myself thinking about the kids that I was doing this for, which is probably not what I expected. But especially that young boy Samuel in Darwin, and then Robbie in Canberra, and I just believe I wasn't expecting that, but they really did just rock up kind of right when I needed them, and there was no, I look back on it now, it's like there was no way I was going to stop. How could you? How could you just stop? I mean, I would never, I don't know how I'd be able to deal with it post-event if I'd stopped and not had finished this, because those people had made such an effort to come out and support some guy that they didn't even know. So for me, that just kind of made it pretty easy, Matt, to just keep charging forward. Yeah.
Do you believe there's a limit to the human spirit at all?
No. I think, and look, I'm still tired from the event, so I guess that's perhaps why there was that pause. But, I think if you've got a good enough motivation or a good enough true reason why you're doing something, why should you stop? And you strip it back to its bare minimum of, okay, well, what's going to keep you moving forward? Well, I had my motivation, and, I still had other motivators that I hadn't even drawn on. And, my support crew were feeding and drinking me. Well, the mind's, that we all know how strong the mind is, and the body follows what the mind tells it to do. So, there's no better example of that than the Iron Cowboy, right? Who did 50 Ironmans in 50 days, which makes mine look like nothing, right? But I got a glimpse of that as I finished number 8. I actually, and sorry to jump to 8, but I didn't want it to finish. I actually wanted to keep going, as sore and as tired as I was, all of that. I was like, you know what? I got to a point where I was like, I actually don't want this to end. It was just so positive, and it was just an amazing experience to be involved in. So, yeah.
After Canberra, you did Sydney, then Brisbane, and then you finished up in Melbourne. If we can maybe jump forward to Melbourne, pretty much when you started that day, was it just like a formality? You knew that, in 10, 11 or however long it would take you, that you were going to get it done?
I didn't. Look, the answer is yes. I knew it'd have to be something kind of catastrophic, bike accident or something going wrong on the run, but there couldn't really be too much go wrong on the run. I mean, my knee was sore, and so yeah, I remember, thinking as we jumped off the bike, yep, this is good. And I saw, Lyndall and Kate on the run course. So Kate had done a great job, and we're actually running around the Albert Park racetrack, which had been closed off for the Grand Prix. So we were lucky enough to have a closed circuit, fully lit. It was an amazing experience. And I remember at some point early on that run, just seeing them and going, we're going to do it. And I never really allowed myself to think that, certainly up until that point. But I just knew at that point there was just nothing, because even if one of my legs had fallen off, we would have crawled and I would have got 42 done or whatever. But, that was never going to happen. And now I just know that was lucky enough that someone captured a photo of that. And it was just a great moment. But then there was also that flip side of, I kind of don't want this to end. And I expect possibly the girls felt that as well, because we were all so ridiculously tired and sleep deprived, but we were all on this massive high of, and the fundraising had gone crazy. After day 5, we were only at 30 grand, and we were all really worried, even though we never spoke about it. I know we were worried, how are we going to get to 80 in those final 3 days? But it had taken off, and by the time I finished in Melbourne, it had reached 70 grand, and then the next day it ticked over to 80. So, it was just the absolute perfect finish I had, and we didn't finish till late. It was 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, but it didn't matter. It was a perfect Melbourne night, surrounded by, friends running with me and athletes running with me and family running with me, and my kids came out, with like 20 minutes to go. We went and someone went and woke them up and dragged them down to the track, and it was just perfect, mate. It was the absolute perfect finish to what was an amazing 8 days, and and the fact, of course, the goal was to raise the 80, and I don't know, I feel really proud of the team that I had around me and what we're able to do, and we did it. So, yeah.
So I just want to also touch on with the sleep deprivation. Yeah, did you have any sort of tips or techniques, in between when you finished a particular day and before you started the next day? How did you try and get as much sleep as you could. Did you have any particular techniques or anything?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of things I'd change. So certainly, number one, don't get yourself anywhere near that state. And we learnt a lot in that first 5 days. And unfortunately, we haven't talked about Sydney and Brisbane, but in a nutshell, Sydney and Brisbane were two of the hardest days of my life, but two of the best as well, just purely from how tired I was. I've never ever experienced it. So we drove from Canberra to Sydney. I wasn't able to sleep in the car, and the high points for Sydney were, well, I had Craig Alexander, who's a 3-time Ironman world champion, come out and swim with me, and I had John McLean come and actually come along and ride the bike with me, and he walked the last 2 kilometres of the run, and even Steve Waugh came down and said hello at the pool. So, I got massive motivation from those guys, which was just incredible. But at the same time, and this happened when I think it was Craig was there on the ride. I was so tired, I actually started to fall asleep on the bike. I started to just get the nods, same as you do in a car. And I had to make the decision to actually stop. And I remember it, not well, but I remember handing my bike to my wife, and I just said, I've just got to sit here for a minute. And I was out to it in a heartbeat. And in that time, somewhere there, they'd Googled, power nap, and it had come up 10 to 15 minutes. So they woke me up 10 minutes later, and I felt a lot better. And off I went again. And so, do I have tips? Especially obviously on the bike, it's not too safe when you're starting to nod off. And luckily I'd read that the Iron Cowboy not luckily, it was very unfortunate, but during his number 18, that's what had happened to him. He'd fallen off the bike because he fell asleep. So I was kind of aware that there was a potential that it might happen. I didn't think it had happened to us because we were only doing 8. And, I just wasn't thinking clearly enough between Canberra and Sydney to think or to expect that to happen. So, and once again, just had to put the ego away, which, you're riding with a 3 times Ironman world champion. But, I just kept thinking, what, if I fall off, well, we're not going to get this thing done. So I don't know. I just did that a couple of times over the next couple of days. I was just, would just get these really quick 10-minute power naps. And, halfway through the run, I know I've seen a photo of me lying on the massage table with a pillow over my head. I've got 2 guys working on me. I don't remember it at all, but Lyndall's told me, yep, I had to sleep then. And, it's still not something that's easy to talk about because it's just not what I expected to do when I was doing an Ironman. But, I'm not too proud to admit that I was just so tired. I just couldn't.
Beyond tired.
I just couldn't think clearly. And then people that knew me have told me that in Brisbane, they said, look, Craig, you didn't say anything for like 6 hours. You were just moving forward, and they just described me as this shell. It's powerful, and it's a little bit confronting, but once again, to go back to how strong the mind is. I was just in, simple left foot, right foot, just keep moving forward. And the guys kept feeding me and couldn't tell you what I had to eat or drink, or I can't remember much about Brisbane at all, but I know we got it done. And,
so did you take much caffeine at all during the day, like either coffee or no-dos or energy drinks or anything like that?
Yeah. So once again, I don't remember. I know we did. So I know after those 10-minute power naps, definitely I had a drink of either V or Red Bull, and I also took some no-dos because we just thought, okay, and we must have talked about it because I wanted to be involved in certainly all of those decisions. We figured, okay, well, that's good enough for another 3 or 4 hours, and then that's kind of how it worked. That would get me through the bike, and then halfway through the run, and I'd have another kip, and that'd get me through to the finish, and then. So we'd had a plan. I did have sleeping tablets on us, but apparently a sleeping tablet stays in your system for 4 hours. And, because Canberra, Sydney and Brisbane, I didn't get more than a 2-hour window to sleep. We never actually took any of those sleeping tablets to try and help me get better sleep because I was just worried it'd still be in my system basically when I had to start the swim. So, but, that's where, you backtrack to Adelaide and Hobart and Canberra, where we just had those unexpected delays, and there probably wasn't urgency to say, right, let's get started, let's keep moving really quick. If we'd been on, hindsight, beautiful thing, we would have been a little bit on top of that, and perhaps it wouldn't have got as ugly as it did towards the end. But that's my advice. Don't get sleep deprived, but certainly don't be afraid to take a nap. Jeez. And I felt pretty good. I remember just a couple of times waking up going, where am I? But Linda would explain to me, she'd say, right, you're at this kilometre mark and this is where we are. And I'd be like, okay. And then within a couple of minutes, I'd be off rolling again and quite quickly feeling pretty good.
Yeah, just with the nutrition, were you having sort of more solid foods towards the end of the 8? Like in the day?
Yeah, so certainly my nutrition dropped off in terms of how many calories I was able to eat. Probably over the final 5 days, actually. I'm not even sure if I probably didn't even have that many gels in that final 5 days. But it changed from day to day. I'm not picky, but I'm not easy when it comes to eating. I changed. So I remember in Adelaide, all I felt like was custard tarts, and so I had to go and find custard tarts. But then in Hobart, I felt like sandwiches, and then I don't remember Canberra, Sydney, and Brisbane too well, but I'm sure it was probably just a mix of something. So Lyndall and whoever, Kate and Ginny, who was there, they just did a great job in just offering me different options. And it might have taken them 4 or 5 suggestions that that sounds good, and I just demolished it. And so I know one of the days, in Sydney, I had a craving for a Big Mac, and sure enough, I demolished a Big Mac. And right from my early days, I've been very good in terms of being able to have whatever I want from on a gastric side. So I learned that at my first year at Hawaii. I got a really crooked stomach from purple Gatorade or something, and I just made a conscious effort after that. So 20 years or whatever it was, 15 years earlier, that in training rides, and I would eat anything. There's no, I intentionally would go out and have milkshakes with pies or whatever it was.
Just calories.
Yeah, calories. So that then come race day, all you had to have was a lovely gel and a bit of, shots of electrolyte. Well, that goes in super easy, right? So, I didn't really get upset stomach at all across the whole 8 days. Actually, I'd never actually even thought about that. But yeah, I certainly didn't have any major toilet issues at all.
What about your metabolism day in, day out, consuming, I don't know, maybe 10 plus litres per day of fluids possibly? How was your metabolism at night?
Because we didn't finish so many nights until, 2 a.m. or whatever. Look, I know, part of our strategy was to jump on the scales. So that was one of Lyndall's job, was every morning, every night, and then before and after every swim, bike and run, I had to hop on the scales. So we were trying to really keep track of, how much dehydration I was going through. I know I definitely looked different. By the time we'd finished 8, I'd certainly, even though the scales weren't really showing it too much, my upper body had certainly slimmed down quite a bit. And the easy answer is to say, it's just dehydration. But, I was pretty good, even when I was as tired as I was and I guess it's just a habit thing, is, just watching what colour your wee is and all of that. And knowing, geez, I really need to drink this bottle on the plane or whatever it was. Look, in terms of metabolism, I think there's no doubt of a night time when I was able to sleep, or on the plane if I was able to get some sleep there. There's no doubt, Matt, that my heart rate would have been through the roof. If I had to guess, I reckon the range would have been really interesting. And unfortunately, I stopped wearing my heart rate monitor after about, I think, Ironman number 4 or 5. Because it just, it was constantly in the low hundreds. So maybe, I might average 110 across a day or whatever. But my guess is at night time, asleep, it was probably 80 to 90. So I just don't think there would have been that much range. But that's fully what I expected. I know from even having done big training camps before, or even big training days for this, I just know that's what my body does, is it kind of goes into this little bit of a hibernation protective mode, and that's what it does for a lot of people as well. Is if it starts to run low on calories, well, it reduces your heart rate so that you can't go to a spot that's I guess dangerous for your body. So
I just want to touch on the mind as well. What did these 8 Ironmen, did it teach you anything about patience at all? Did you get any sort of deep insight into that?
Patience. I don't know. My wife reckons, that I'm the most patient man in the world. I guess maybe more because I am how I am with my kids, and also, some of my athletes, and it is something that I try and get across to my guys is, you can't expect to go 9 hours at an Ironman after 6 months of training, and, it just takes a long time. I think, look, I don't know, man, the biggest thing I got out of this, from a selfish side for me was I got to prove to myself that I can still raise the bar at 44 years of age or after 30 years of exercise or whatever. And I feel really, really proud of that. So I guess patience is a part of that. But I've just always believed in my ability to hurt myself in a really good way. And I just feel really proud that, as I say, with the team I had around me, that we were able to do that, but for a really good cause. And I don't know, I have an immense amount of satisfaction in me right now. And, as I say, right now I could hang up the boots and leave triathlon very, very happy. That's not going to happen because I've got to work out a way to bottle what we did over those 8 days in terms of the number of kids that came out and ran with me. It was one of the most unexpected things, 10 and 12, 14-year-old kids that had never run more than 5K before, but came out and ran 10 or 15 it was just amazing. And I say about the social media again, the positivity that was around the event is right now I'm super motivated is, okay, how can we do that? I can't do 8 Ironmans in 8 days every week. But how do we get that feeling on a larger scale and get more people involved in kicking goals, right? Or, born to kick ass, however you want to say it, is getting people to go outside of their comfort zone. That's where I'm really motivated at the moment is how can we just show people that, it's in absolutely everyone if you want to do it. The mind's amazing. If your body is healthy, you can just, don't be afraid to have a crack because we all know you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So, just don't be afraid to have a go. So
yeah, that's super inspiring. And whereabouts can listeners find you online?
Oh, thanks, mate. So my website is nolimitendurance.com.au. Obviously, they can get me at Craig at nolimitendurance.com.au. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook or Twitter as well. Certainly the website's the easiest way. And looking at our Everyday Hero page is still open for donations. So if you go to the Everyday Hero, so if anyone has an extra few dollars, I know the John McClane Foundation and I would be truly appreciative if you could. It's just on the everydayhero.com.au website, and if you just search for 8 in 8 in 8, you will find it there. So currently we're at 85,000, which is really, really great. I've got a couple of gigs to do. Doing a speaking gig tomorrow night, which will throw a few more dollars in there. And I don't know, part of me still wants it just to keep ticking over. And who knows what maybe we'll target to get to 88 or I don't know, 100 grand or something. So it all counts. It really does all count.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever come down from this high?
I guess the reality is, yeah, probably. Look, I've had a few patches where, and my wife's the same. Is we're missing it already. We want that buzz again of getting people around and involved. And having raced enough Ironmans over the years, the post Ironman blues is a very real thing and not something to be laughed about. It's a very serious thing in terms of athletes coming off. Whether they achieved a major goal or they didn't achieve it. Sometimes achieving it might be worse, but so I don't know. I try. I just keep looking forward, mate. 8 and 8 has been an amazing experience and something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. But it's also in the rearview mirror, and you've got to keep looking forward. And right now, as I say, we're trying to work out, okay, how do we bottle what we've done and what's next? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's an incredible achievement that you've done, and thanks again for your time coming onto the Born to Kick Arse podcast. I'll put all the links to your website and Facebook and all the social media in the show notes.
Thanks, mate.
And good luck with the future and good luck with recovery.
Thanks.
And thanks again for your time, and it was great speaking with you.
Oh, Matthew, I really appreciate you having me on, mate. All the very best with the podcast, and look, certainly I'll keep you posted, obviously, with any new major developments, and once again, I really appreciate you having me on. All the very
No worries.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Cheers.
If you've made it this far in the Born to Kick Arse podcast, then you've done well. I want to continue introducing you to the most fascinating people on the planet so you can get an inside look at their approach, mindset, and secrets to success. Hopefully, these interviews will inspire you to take steps towards reaching your own goals, no matter how big or small. One common theme all these people have is that they are proactive, and I need you to be proactive right now by subscribing, rating, and reviewing this podcast on iTunes. I also need you to head over to borntokickarse.com and subscribe to my newsletter. Please also tell one close friend about this podcast, someone like you who also kicks ass and wants to realize their full human potential. Welcome aboard and catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. What's stopping you from kicking ass?